Hello. Welcome to the Aaron Swartz podcast. I am really happy to be here with you today. And I've got Andre Sobral here. Andre, say hello.
Hello. How are
He
y'all?
he is with the Aaron Swartz Institute in Brazil and got his PhD thesis on analyzing Aaron's writings. And he'll be talking today about TikTok and censorship ban in the light of Aaron's writings after I give a little introduction about what this week is about. Oh, good. Here's the link for the show that I'm going to be blogging and tweeting so that everybody will have the link. Sorry, it's just the way this works. I haven't set us up for premieres yet, so I got to send it out when we go live. And there it is. I'm just gonna. All right. Great. So I wanted to tell you a little bit more about why we're doing this podcast, how everything fits together, and why we're going to focus on the TikTok ban today. So what we've been doing is we want to show you how relevant many of his writings are in a present day context, in the hopes of maybe gleaning some wisdom, or at least chuckling about what he thought was the case about whatever subject it is. Often it's what we all thought was the case at the time, and that's why it's kind of funny when we look back. And if only everybody could be able to talk to everybody in a large sort of network, everything would get worked out. Stuff like that. Things we've been finding out through these last 4 shows that we've already done is that he has written about a lot of the issues we face today. And it's not some miracle or anything. It's that these issues are universal and ongoing. They don't really go away. Things like xenophobia, racism, genocide, censorship, reproductive rights, they're timeless. And they already have lots of books written about them, many of which Aaron has read. Andre is great about bringing that into the fold, and he has everything sourced. So you can go look at the books yourself afterwards if you'd like, which is what makes me so excited about these presentations and everything. And I'm going to start sourcing the things that I talk about too. I'm going to give a little introduction on the TikTok ban, and that will be completely sourced so that anybody, teachers, people, whatever, could really put this information to use if they wanted it in their classroom. That's kind of the point. So since this seems to be the best way to get things done as non-billionaires in this world, doing things little by little as best we can. So here we go with our little bit of good for today. All right, now I'm going to share my screen. All right. So what's going on with the TikTok ban? TikTok ban. In this iteration of our podcast, iterations, I like to think of our podcast in iterations. Aaron is the one that first got me thinking about iterations way back when, 2002, when he was explaining to me how we were going to make things better and better. I wasn't a programmer yet. And we're trying to make this podcast better and better, and that's why I'm calling it an iteration. So in this iteration of our podcast, we're going to talk about the main details behind the TikTok ban, and how it was, first of all, it was snuck into another bill to give aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. The Taiwan part I didn't know until I looked it up and saw the Washington Post had that in there. And the idea was that this was a bill that had to pass, and they managed to tack it on at the last minute so that they'd basically have to take on Congress on these other issues if you wanted to complain about the TikTok ban. They're not calling it a ban, but it's clearly a ban. And basically, it gives TikTok 9 months to sell itself to an American entity. And it's on national security grounds. And, we're very familiar with those. Those are the kind that they don't justify at all. They basically say it's national security and we can't even tell you the nature because national security, and, fuck off because national security. That's basically all bets are off once they start pulling out the national security stuff. And you can you can keep going on the case, but it's very hard, and there's all these special rules. So we'll probably see that unfold as the ByteDance case unfolds, because ByteDance has sued. They've actually filed a lawsuit against the government over this legislation. There's also a weird Red Scare taste to this whole thing, and I'm actually going to show you a clip. Just a second, so that you can see this xenophobic thing isn't, and this is a real clip I'm going to show you, just to say that ahead of time. Because the first time I saw it, I was kind of amazed. So here we go. I'm just going to play it real quick. It's super short. And just so we don't have to argue about whether this is taking place or not. It's definitely taking place, and we can all watch it together. Boop.
Of what nation are you a citizen?
Singapore.
Are you?
Here's how we've sold over 5 million wallets from this garage. Hey, I'm Daniel, one of the founders of RIT.
A citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever applied for Chinese citizenship?
Senator, I served my nation in Singapore. No, I did not.
Do you have a Singaporean passport?
Yes, and I served my military for two and a half years in Singapore.
Do you have any other passports from any other nations?
No, Senator.
Your wife is an American citizen. Your children are American citizens.
That's correct.
Have you ever applied for American citizenship?
No, not yet.
Okay. Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean. No.
Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator. Again, I'm Singaporean.
Let me ask you some hopefully simple questions.
Yeah, wow. So I'm just going to go back to our thing there. So here he is assuring that he's not a member of the Communist Party. Are you, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? So that's real. That's a real thing. And I just wanted to show that because we'll be talking about that throughout the show. And that's sort of an open and shut case as far as I'm concerned. So I just wanted to make our case. So here we go. First Amendment and censorship. So we're going to be talking about censorship, Aaron's writings on censorship. And I just want to really quick make the case for why this is a censorship issue. And special thanks to David Greene, who I was able to have some discussions with yesterday on the other podcast I do, the Mindplex podcast. And I, of course, put a link to that in the description so you can see the whole show with him. But that's why I'm able to give you this like 2-minute rundown. So thank you, David, for that. So basically, the feds are saying, censorship is unconstitutional, violates the First Amendment. Why? Basically because in this case, it violates the rights of both TikTok and also its users. And it's the same way their newspaper's ability to publish is protected under the First Amendment, and your ability to access the free press that is being feared with, in this case, by the legislation, where the free press is other users on TikTok, because it's the users that generate the content. All right. And although the official stance is national security, and again, I always like to make the best argument for the people I disagree with. So it's like, we're not trying to be tricky. Their argument never changes. It's a dangerous world. Bad stuff's going on. And the Chinese government could access the user data, which isn't being stored securely. And also, ding, ding, disinformation and misinformation that can influence the elections. That's content. And so even though the first part sounds really good, the second part more than suggests that this ban is about content and not a clear-cut national security threat. It's important to remember that a lot of people get TikTok for their news, and that the news is often different than what the mainstream media is saying. This happened with the Ukraine war, where the news was saying one thing and the videos out of Ukraine were saying a different thing. It's happening now in Gaza, where the news is saying one thing, the official report is one thing, and then these videos coming out of there showing that it doesn't quite match up. So if TikTok was gone, then you don't have these problems anymore of having news you can't control going directly to users that you also can't control what they're accessing. But people use this for lots of different purposes, and they're making money on it and things like that too. This is actually where I think this case might go for Americans if they want to sue over this. David was clear to correct me that it's not like a class action or anything like that. It's the kind of thing where you are being deprived of your right to access something, but it's hard to get damages and things like that. It's mainly just you sue for access to be able to get the access back, or in this case, to stop it from being banned. Okay, a couple funny things. Even the politicians who just banned it are all using it for their political campaigns. In fact, it's almost as if they did it on purpose to finish after the election. They're giving them 9 months to sell it. There's 170 million people on the app, just to make that clear. And also, if all this goes to hell and they end up having to sell it, and you get it through some other means, because it will be removed from the app stores, you can download it and use it. There's no penalties for using it. There's nothing like that in the legislation. So that's sort of an important point that I wanted to make sure people knew. So it's really just like closing down the bookstore or blocking a news channel, making it hard for people to communicate with each other or disseminate information with each other. And historically, we've learned there's usually no good reason for doing it ever. And TikTok does not appear to be an exception to those rules. So with that, I will hand it over to Andre. And Andre's going to talk about the censorship issues in light of Aaron's writings. Take it away, Andre.
Thank you, Lisa. Let me share my screen. So we're continuing the series of interpreted social theory about Aaron Swartz's view of the world. And this subtitle, Reimagining Politics, because we are mainly focused on his text about politics. And censorship is one thing that Aaron doesn't really get into very often, but is all along his work anyway, as a subtopic that is interesting because he's dealing with a lot of things that are related to censorship. And then we're going to see how this shows up. If you want to support the Institute Aaron Swartz in Brazil, where I'm actually engaged in studying Aaron and trying to spread his word here, you can have contact with us or donate. So censorship is actually a very interesting concept because we actually have this very clear image of what censorship looks like. It's something way closer to us than we would like to. I'm using Jonathan Greene, Encyclopedia of Censorship, to try to define censorship, because actually when we think about the pop culture of this idea, we're thinking about like 1984 or something like evil big government trying to have everyone silenced. And when we're going to try to take a look at the concept, we're going to see that it's a little bit more complicated. So censorship has to do with authority. The word censor in Latin, it's talking about the government official of Rome that is in charge of counting people and surveying the culture and making sure the rules are being followed in a province. And censorship is the act of exerting this government over the people. So this idea to appraise, evaluate, assess the state of things of the word censorship is not actually what means to have it, what means to be censored. But I think that is a good place to start because it's talking about this concept of having something over tapes or barriers created by some central authority. So there is the idea of someone in control that chooses what is not acceptable. So when you're talking about censorship, we can also be talking about the idea of morality, in the sense that when you decide that something shouldn't be seen or talked about or heard, you're trying to talk about some values that orient this decision. So Lisa talked about the idea of national security. This is a moralistic idea that the safety of the country is more important than the right to talk about it, in the sense that something that we have as priority is to be safe. So when you're talking about restricting TikTok, and you say that is a matter of national security, you're trying to say that TikTok may harm everyone in the US. So this is an argument that presupposes that people are not very well equipped to deal with things that are in TikTok or the way TikTok operates, or that someone behind TikTok has an ill intent of harming Americans and creating some kind of mayhem. But we can also see the same idea of morality inspiring censorship in other things that are more common, like when you're trying to set up what kind of things has the right to be on a movie or a comic book or on a book that is available at a library. In the sense, there's many groups, mainly religious groups, but other groups too, that are concerned about what kind of content the kids are being exposed to or certain publics are being exposed to. In the sense that you can also have a part of society that is concerned of trying to restrict the way people have access to this content. So when you have that black square over someone's face to protect a victim or a whistleblower, you're trying to say that censoring that part of the image is more important because of his security or something else, and not actually censoring you from that content. So you can see there is a gray area of imagining, like, should we have any kind of censorship, or is censorship good in any way? When you think like about product advertisement for kids, should it have any kind of censorship? Should anyone be looking at the rules of how to make advertisements to children? So there is this muddy waters that maybe somehow this concept can be applied in an acceptable way. But then we're talking actually about the control, in the sense that to make something censored, or to have a censorship being acted by a government, you need to have power to enact it. That's when Lisa was talking about if you're going to be punished if you use TikTok. So when you're talking about censorship, you're always talking about what kind of tools do we have in our command to enact it. So is it possible to go after everyone that uses TikTok, 70 million users, 170 million users, or any person that connects in a phone that maybe it's not even from the United States and has TikTok on his phone will be arrested impromptu, like by police force? So it's not actually that easy to exert censorship. So when you're trying to talk about censorship, you're trying to talk about someone that has a very big power to make it so that no one will be able to have access to that information. And in these times that we live in, we have other types of power of censoring things, like when you post a picture to Facebook and has nipples on it, and then the program says it's not appropriate, or Twitch was using some kind of idea like that to ban certain kind of contents that are sexual in nature, in the sense that we already have these tools to censor material. And we have this idea that if you have the way of controlling communication, you have a certain power that is impossible to measure, in the sense that is very versatile tool of control. So when talking about censorship, we're going to talk about how people are working with fear, in the sense of what will happen with the kids if they have access to this content, or what will happen if you're going to the library and this person is going to have these awful ideas like communism, or like hate worshiping Satan, or anything like that. So the idea that you have to convince people in order to enact censorship, and you convince them by fear, because censorship is always applied to something that feels like a threat. So even if you say about we need to worry about national security to justify a TikTok ban, you're talking about the capability of another country to intervene in the United States by the internet. So if this is true, technically every program that you use that's not made in the United States has this capability. So are we going to censor them all? What makes TikTok special? So the fear card comes in. No, TikTok is made by a company from China. China is a country that's not friendly to the US. We are competing with them. We have trade bans. We have tariffs. We have so many other things being applied. They don't have our best or best health in their minds, in the sense that they have motives to attack us. So the Red Scare comes in, they have the idea of communism, they have the idea of this competition. So they need to use fear as a way to justify it. So national security is a fear-based argument. But the same thing can be said about children not being allowed to have contact with certain material, or porn being censored because it will create some kind of compartmental behavior in the people. So when we're trying to talk about censorship, it's easier to see the censorship that is pointed at by the media as a problematic thing. Like China is trying to develop world-built censorship and surveillance, talking about how digital Silk Road is exporting the way of China of dealing with the internet, or that Russia has arrested 2 more journalists. So Russia is always using the state power to censor the free press, or how the Islamic Republic has enslaved the Iran internet, in the sense that Iran doesn't have contents from the free world, so they are very narrow-minded, and this religious republic is controlling the internet there. Or that Venezuela is trying to stop the opposition from expressing themselves, so they have to go to the internet to have a say, because the printing press, the airwaves, the TVs are all censored. So that's kind of a way we actually agree all the time that the other people are censored and we aren't. But then if you turn this thing around, you're going to see that it's not actually restricted to those countries. So you see Israel kicking out Al Jazeera and saying they are incitement machine, in the sense that they're making Israeli people against the government. And you have the Biden administration signing the law banning TikTok. So you have United States doing the same thing that we are criticizing other countries doing. So you have the story of Julian Assange. It's a person that's not even American, it's Australian, and he is being persecuted and being attacked for so long now. It's more than a decade. So it's actually way easier to see that censorship acts on both sides, and it's a danger, a civilizatory danger, or a danger to humankind, and not exactly something that is restricted to the evil people. So we have now this wide array of protests against the US financing of the war in Palestine. And you have the government using the US taxpayer money and the police forces to arrest people that are peacefully saying their mind on the campus of the universities. So isn't this censorship? What can we call censorship then? So let's go to see what Aaron has to talk about all these things. Aaron, in 2003, so he is very young yet, he's thinking about how censorship works and talking about control. That was one of the topics I was talking when I was explaining about censorship. He was concerned that the problem of censorship is not that governments will try to do censorship. He's expecting them to do that. Government don't work in a respectable way or in a trustworthy way. So what he's expecting, that once government decides to censorship something, can we have an infrastructure, something that makes us immune to censorship? So he imagines this one box, a software upgradable box that uses new protocol and frequencies that are updated all the time. So this becomes like a chase of government trying to ban it, and it's being updated all the time, so it's not possible. And the people will be able to own the internet in this sense. When governments try to censor and asks like the internet service providers to cut some content out, you can route the connection to another place. So this is almost like the Tor network that you connect to other computers to have it. But he's imagined this not as a software, but as a hardware, that everyone could have these boxes and they connect to each other until you get to somewhere that is not really censored. So you can remake the internet in its original image. What does he mean by that? Because Internet, as the word means, is the between networks, in the sense that there are many networks in the internet, not just one, and you can communicate between those places that are connected by the network. So if you make a big enough network, you could go around any kind of censorship that the government makes. This is
right. So this is the internet routing around censorship, and this is a more decentralized internet like we had in the 90s.
Exactly.
That he's describing.
So this is the sense of the things that happen when you're trying to use the VPN to access through other countries. This is the sense of things that happen when you have a server that is in a country that the United States can't persecute because they have different laws. So the idea of Aaron here is that we could have this in a more fashionable and careable way, in the sense that you could have this device that it's able to create its own internet instead of like depending on the service providers. And then we have Aaron, still in the same year, but in the end of the year, talking about his view of censorship. And then he's talking about the idea of censorship as something moral. So he's ironically like describing the work of the censors. The folks at organizations at the Parents Television Council have the unrewarding job of watching endless quantities of television, carefully watching for sexual behavior, show or implied. The brave members of the Child Care Action Projects go see every new movie, marking down every swear word spoken, every violent act, each appearance of drugs, and again, all sexual content. So he's imagined these people that spend all their time looking through these books or these TV shows and trying to find something to point and say, aha, this is evil for children. We have to stop.
It's true. And I mean, hey, the church has been doing it for years. This is literally what the priests in the Catholic Church used to sit around and do, go through books looking for books to ban. Except this is the government.
Yeah. And not always just the government. It's also like he's saying parents associations or religious organizations that are getting people together to do that.
But what power do they have? They have to use it to convince somebody in government to do something with the information. These people are pretty harmless in the sense that they want to sit around watching porn all day and making notes about it. It doesn't really hurt anybody. Yeah. It's only when they try to convince a member of Congress to pass legislation that affects our lives that it's a problem, right? And this is the main difference, again, between sort of our walks of life. Is we would never stop them from doing whatever behavior we wouldn't do, you know, that they're always trying to get us to stop doing things, just to not have it control over our own lives in different ways. Yeah. And remember in 2003, this is when COPA, and this is when a lot of child protection acts were being floated and some passed, I think. And this is when the EFF was showing that the filters were bad, that they were filtering out, for instance, breast cancer research pages along with the breasts of the not even porn, but just, oh my God, a boob on a web page. Yeah. And the filters don't work for that. So you're just restricting your kids from getting information as opposed to protecting them.
That's true.
That's why, just about that time period, this is when this was happening a lot. There was like 3 or 4 different pieces of legislation that the EFF in particular was trying to show how they were all crap because they were all suggesting that these filters were going to save the day. So they proved they can. Yay, EFF! Okay, go on.
He continues listing this kind of idea. Meanwhile, the American Decency Association carefully goes through the Abercrombie and Fitch catalog, searching their pages for the every last bare butt and breast, marking down the page numbers on which they appear, and putting the results on the internet. Why do these people take on this unrewarding job? We may never know. All I can do is think of them sitting there in front of their television, movie screen, or nude photographs, carefully examining offensive and sexual content, and thank them for doing what most of us could not stomach. So that's funny.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if that's exactly what they're doing while they're watching all that porn, but it's that's always been the joke about this kind of thing. It's a horrible job, but somebody's got to do it. Maybe they don't hate it so much.
Yeah. So when Aaron's a little older, in 2007, he gives this lengthy interview to a Google employee that's called Philip Flessen. And he is asked during the interview what he thinks about the thing, the censorship thing. And then he is very clear about his posture. He thinks all censorship should be deplored. His position is that bits are not a bug, that we should not create communication technology that allow people to send whatever they like to each other. And when people put their thumbs on the scale and try to say what can and can't be sent, we should fight back, both politically, through protests, and technologically through software like Tor. So he has a very clear stance on censorship that's not acceptable. And he's trying to do his best to let people know that there is another way of fighting censorship, not just the protests, but there is technology that helps doing that. And then we have his other text, the Censorship Resistance Web, that is in 2010, 3 years later from this interview. And he's thinking about what we could do. He talks a lot about in many technical terms of what you can do to create a more resistant web to censorship. And a thing that I think that is very interesting to show here is that he's talking about the idea of a rollback UI. So just like the service that the Internet Archive
I was going to say, it's just like the Wayback Machine. It is the Wayback Machine, basically. Yeah.
So he says, if you know vaguely when the censorship attempts started, you can just trust certifications made before that date. That actually reminds me that some people are advertising that you can also Google search things from a date to the past instead of on the present. So if you Google things from 2012 or 2013, you're going to find different contents on the same information. Like, I want to know about a movie, but I want the findings only be from this date to the past.
Are you saying there's a command that you can put in the Google search to give it a date range? Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. Do you know what it is? Is it just a date range?
I didn't separate here, but something like 2 points, and you have before and the dates, and you can look it up at the Google. But it's very interesting because the idea that the internet is not something that is always being destroyed and disappearing from the past, but something that lingers, and you can tell these websites or these search machines that you can look for dates and not actually just any content with that word, the keyword. It's something that people are not very familiar with. They are actually always thinking that we're going to always find something that is the most recent and not what you ask for. And then you have Aaron say, if you have this page appears censored, you can just hit a go back amount button on the system that will only trust certifications made more than a month prior to the certifications currently using. Yeah. So user can always hit this button many times until he gets the uncensored version of the page. So he's actually,
or just the edited version of an earlier edit, right? It's very easy to see edits that were done for all sorts of different reasons and decide that they're censorship. That's the only problem I see with this. You're just going to get all the changes that were made. I mean, if it's a New York Times, I mean, when I saw a written version of the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson in the basement of the New York Public Library, where he writes about how bad slavery is and then crosses it all out, then you're like, oh, this was censored from the final version because it's so relevant. It's clearly right. Mm-hmm. But in general, people change websites for all sorts of reasons. And I could see the conspiracy theory, as someone who is sometimes targeted by conspiracy theorists, I could see that this would be a slippery slope kind of thing. This also ties in another thing that he talked about annotating web pages. Mm-hmm. And it was a combination of being able to go back in time and also letting people who had nothing to do with the webpage leave comments and things, which is something people are still trying to do now. And so anyway, just what I'm remembering about some things he was talking about.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. in fact, Wikipedia also does something like that, because every time you edit a wiki page, it goes to a history of edits, and you can go back each version to see what was changed.
Right. Well, in that case, it's specifically because you're editing basically what's supposed to be a fact-based Wikipedia page, and if a fact is accurate, it's not supposed to be taken out. And if you do take it out, you need to have a good reason for it and justify why. And actually, the system works well, except when there are fake facts with fake articles, which is what I came across editing the guano, because a friend of mine I was working with sells bat guano for fertilizer. The guano page on Wikipedia is just wrong. It's fantasy. And it was definitely put up by people that are selling the nitrogen guano, the fake nitrogen guano, making the seagull and the bat guano sound bad. So when I went to just change it, because it was just like a bad thing to go change, and I had the article with the right information in it, the whole thing had been carefully crafted with fake articles and everything. You had to link out them and go look to see they were fake, to see that. But when it links to a big, long academic article that you're not going to read, right? So I had to search for the words used in the sentence to see if it was even in the thing, which it wasn't half the time. Sometimes it was there, but it was wrong. But the point is, hours later, right? You're trying to put this together, and so that's the only problem with Wikipedia's system. That it's a good example of a system that is generally working pretty well and very functional. Except if someone really wants to take the time to set up a whole page with false references, and you got to mix the real ones in there, to make it blend in, not to give anybody bad ideas. But this is why Wikipedia has become a little bit more, I guess I'm going to use the word militaristic. They are really tough now. If you get in there and you start messing with some page, you better have a damn good reason and have your facts to prove it, or they'll just restrict you, from that page, because in the disinformation wars, So again, the systems like this, it's a nice idea, but I can immediately think of 50 ways why it wouldn't, But again, he's got the trust certifications mixed in too. So it's another way. It sounds like he's mixing in the fake. For instance, if someone had a fake version of that website, like as if there was a fake site and a real site that both had similar information, but one of them had the trust certifications, right? Or why we're all using HTTPS now, so that we know that it's a real version of the website, and have everything encrypted so it can't be sniffed. Which was another thing that Aaron fought for with another friend of ours, Peter Eckersley, who eventually got it done, with the EFF. So I'm just saying it's interesting. A lot of this thinking, how as time goes on with the bad actors, it might not be as effective as it seems like it would have been at the time.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to say 14 years later. Right? That's all it is. Okay, please continue.
And then it's interesting because he's thinking about the user-friendly way of doing this, like a button that you can click and goes back, and not something that have to code or change something in the hypertext to find the older page. It's something that should be like easily accessible. So when you're talking about Aaron and censorship, we're talking about someone that was thinking about internet infrastructure and how we could protect ourselves against the others that have this intent of shielding us from the world. So he was always like free speech and free information advocate. So that's it.
All right. Thank you very much. So yeah, censorship bad, everybody was kind of in agreement on that part. And again, when it comes to fighting it, it's different people have different definitions of censorship, and people sometimes have their reasons for not doing something or not talking about something because of the backlash, if it's something that there's sort of no good thing, if you're not adding to the conversation, like if I was to try to do a show about Gaza, I'm not going to bring anything to the table, right? I'm ignorant of I'm basically, compared to experts, ignorant of the situation. I mean, I'm following it more closely than I ever have, I tell you that, and I don't like what Israel's doing. That's easy to say. But in terms of like bringing something to the table that's going to help, right? It's not going to be coming from me, right? But there are people that a lot of times they want you to talk about whatever's going on to try to help their cause. But I know from experience that even a well-meaning famous person can really screw things up if they say the wrong thing at the wrong time, like they're not helping, right? Yeah. So, but is that censorship to tell them, or if I had a show and I said, for instance, the perfect example, if I had a show and I said, yeah, we're not going to get into Gaza too much because it's hard to get into and I'm not going to do it well, somebody might say, oh my God, she's censoring talking about Gaza. She doesn't want us to talk about Gaza, right? Which is not what I mean at all. And I didn't say don't talk about Gaza. I just said, we're not going to get into it, right? So there's different ways that things can be taken, and it really depends on what's in the person's head at the time. It's just my opinion, and I'm a trained soldier from the Broadcast Electronic Communications Department at San Francisco State, and they trained me that meanings are in people. This is from their pedagogy class when I was in grad school. You can say the same thing to somebody, and depending on what's in their head at the time, they're going to react to it completely differently. Not just personal stuff, what kind of day they've had and that kind of shit, but their whole background of how they view the world, and then all the stuff from that day mixed in, and then the moment that you give them the info. And so this is always a thing in everybody's head as you're, presenting anything. And censorship is one of those topics, in the sense that, so as somebody who has been accused in the past of censoring things, for instance, at Aaron Swartz Day events, speakers that had no business being there, that were mad because I wouldn't let them talk. Okay. So it's very interesting. And it wasn't that they were doing anything wrong. They were saying all sorts of crazy stuff that I didn't want associated with the event. It wasn't that they were bad. They were just kind of dumb, and having them talk wasn't going to help anything. They didn't even know what to say about themselves correctly, in my opinion. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't going to help them. It wasn't going to help me. It wasn't going to happen. Right. But that became a thing. So it's very easy. It's hard to draw the line on that. For me, censorship is just like what we've been talking about with TikTok, where you have a perfectly good thing that people are using, that data security concerns were brought up and dealt with. We're going to see about that. We'll see how well they were dealt with. They were comically dealt with. I laugh when I see this video that we're going to show, because they have been dealt with to such ends, more than any American companies have been forced to do with their user data that we know they misuse on a regular basis, right? We don't even have to wonder. Facebook puts out papers about how they misuse their data. Everyone's like, oh, isn't that interesting? And unfortunately, it was very interesting, right? So you always have that, go, oh, this is horrible. Like, give me that paper. I want to learn all about it, right? So as I say, it's a complicated issue. And again, in the censorship part of this TikTok ban, using national security without any justification and then complaining about the content, that's why we're calling it censorship. So now I'm going to share my screen and just talk about a few more things following up on the TikTok ban. And if anything comes to mind, Andre, about what you, anything having to do with Aaron's writings or anything like you were talking about, just chime in. Okay. So I just wanted to give you some more details, audience, about the law. These are things that I was dying to know that I cleared up. And why this is so bad, and why the government is so clearly, in my opinion, trying to kill TikTok. Okay, trying to put it out of business. The law requires them to sell the company, but not necessarily the algorithm. These are two separate things. There's the company and there's the algorithm, and they're both owned by ByteDance. So of course they would sell it without the algorithm, because I mean, they're not stupid. And so now we've got an American company without the algorithm. The algorithm is why everybody likes TikTok to begin with. Okay, so that's not there anymore. So it will just fail. Okay, so again, we don't really get it back. The idea that we're going to get some safe American version of TikTok instead of this shady Chinese one that we all already use, that 170 million people already use every day, already have their businesses on it. They've worked it into their routine. They've worked it into their lifestyle. Some people, this is the only way they get their news. Some countries, it's the only way they can get their news. Okay, this is what's at stake. So yeah, government intervention in public content is not the kind of thing you'd expect in a democracy. We usually lead the way in things like this. We condemn other countries when they shut down Twitter. When Egypt shut down Twitter, we went, no, no, no. Nigeria shut down Twitter, no, no, no. And we try to set an example. So this is really bad. I've seen some articles talking about how this is a great time to be a dictator, right? Because the United States isn't putting pressure on countries like it used to about this stuff, and in fact is considering very questionable practices in its own country. And we look bad to the rest of the world. And when I ask my friends, does it look that bad? They tell me, yeah, it looks that bad. Don't even try. They used to try to make me feel better. You know, even during Trump, they would laugh and say, oh, no. Now they're like, hey, what the fuck? Do something. This is bad. You know, this looks bad. So again, the rationale for deeming TikTok a security, what rationale did Congress give? It didn't. It didn't give one. We have no idea if the risks are real and tangible. They always could be, I guess, because we don't know for sure. I have to say that. But it doesn't seem like it. They usually are pretty specific when there's specific stuff. And they would, if they could give specifics to the judge in this case, that would probably change the situation, but I doubt they're going to, because I don't think that they're really there. This is xenophobic. Foreign governments bad. Foreign governments will misuse user data, even though they can't because it's in the United States. So now nothing makes sense anymore, and there's no there anymore. So again, we understand the national security stuff. We are used to this with a lot of EFF cases. Often surveillance, specifically the AT&T case, where the Bush administration created a separate room in the AT&T building for all of the calls to go in and out of, so they could make a copy of all of them. And the guy that did that ended up blowing the whistle, going straight to the EFF. A while after it happened, he had to kind of realize what he had done, and he kind of woke up one morning and was like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And he went to the EFF, and that case litigated for years. More and more and more and more before it might have eventually gotten thrown out. Why? National security, because they don't have to prove their case if they can just say it's national security. And then it's up to the judge to make them have evidence-based reasons or not. And that's really case-by-case basis as far as, you know, how far these cases go before a judge says to the government, you have to do this or you have to do that to make your case. Or doesn't say that, and the case gets thrown out. So just to be clear, TikTok does not collect any more than all the other apps. It collects probably the same as all the other apps. I don't know for sure. I'm not an employee at TikTok. I'm not the one doing the collecting. But we do know that all the data is kept in a special building with a U.S. Data Security is the name of the company. It's got U.S. employees in it. It's in Texas. It's American. You know, like you can't make it any more secure. And let's just real quick, I'm going to show this video where TikTok, whoops. All right, hold on a minute. And I can reshare my screen and turn the sound down a tiny bit, Grant, because this video is kind of loud. So I can turn it down. Oh, okay. I can turn it down a little. Great, I will. All right, here we go, everybody.
Security of your data. Our goal is to make our app the most secure social media experience on the internet. Here's how we're doing that. As a US user, when you open TikTok, you're actually entering a protective environment designed to safeguard you and your data. This is where you see videos, where we run the systems that power the For You feed, where small businesses market their products, and where you find and purchase cool new items. To enhance the safety of your experience, we've spent more than $1.5 billion on security to prevent unauthorized foreign access to your data and the systems that deliver you content. The safeguards we're implementing mean that you, as a US user, benefit from an even greater set of protections for your data without any changes to the experience you love on TikTok. Our app is connected to Oracle, a trusted US cloud provider with strong...
Okay, the data is not being saved offshore. That's the point.
Security credentials. The technology that powers the TikTok app in the US runs in Oracle's secure cloud environment, and our plans include appointing other trusted third parties to independently assess the security of the environment on an ongoing basis.
Okay, this is the part that I couldn't look up. It's the one ding against TikTok in this whole thing that I can find, just for the record. I haven't found anything about independent researchers assessing the security on an ongoing basis. So there, I just wanted to say that one thing.
If you're a US user logging into TikTok, all your data is stored by default in this cloud, where access is managed by a dedicated team of US employees. This US team is employed by a separate company called US Data Security.
So it's US team, US employees. The company is called US Data Security, and it's USDS are the initials. So you can't get more American than that.
Or USDS, that will operate separately from the rest of TikTok and its parent company, ByteDance. We've established USDS and are in the process of moving over 1,000 US employees into that company. To provide additional safeguards, our plan is for USDS to report to an independent board of directors who will be American citizens with strong cybersecurity credentials. The whole system is designed to prevent unauthorized foreign access to your data and the software that delivers you TikTok content. As of October 2022, all new US user data is stored in the US as we take steps to delete all historic data. The system protecting US user data will be managed and monitored by US companies. When you compare all of this to the other entertainment and social platforms out there, this data management and security system is truly the first of its kind. You're the reason TikTok is such a special place to find community, learn new things, discover amazing creators, and share your creativity with the world. And we're committed to making sure you feel safe and secure to do that.
Okay, so the other thing then that came up that I noticed that I just want to bring is the stored data issue. Stored data is an issue that is near and dear to my heart because of my work with Tracy Rosenberg at Oakland Privacy on the Aaron Swartz Police Surveillance Project. And we are always fighting with cops, with the police department, about how long they're going to store, for instance, license plate reader data, or how long they're going to store facial recognition data, which they needed for parking and funny stuff like that. So that's a real issue. And I also didn't find anything about that when I tried to follow up because it was 2022. So it's easy to go, oh, did they do everything they said? So the two dings I could find, if you want to get picky, is the third-party verification from trusted sources and the confirmation of the deletion of stored data. And except for those things, here's my argument. They've already done everything that the government might require them to do as a result of this legislation, in my opinion, with regard to data security. Okay? I can't think of another thing that they could do to make the U.S. data more secure and controlled by U.S. people and stuff like that. Now, can China still get a copy of it? Probably. They always could. Our government could get a copy of it too. That's because your data is never safe when it's stored by any company. So, but we know that all the time when we use our phones. We've all kind of, I don't know, got some kind of cognitive dissonance about that. Because, we all know, we all do it, like out of my cold dead hand, you're not going to take my phone away. So those were I just wanted to show you that video and address those points just to sort of have a complete understanding about everything that's going on. And then it must be, whoops. Oh, did I close my...
Can I chime in?
Huh?
Let me chime in a little.
Oh, please do.
We usually hear a discourse of censorship being something that people do and not actual institutions. So when they say, like the example you said before, they're censoring me, they don't want me to talk about this theme, or they're complaining on my comments, that's not actually censorship, because they have no power to stop you from talking, even if it's boring or discomfortable or aggressive. But when you're talking about these systems, like you're saying about what TikTok did to ensure US data safety, you're talking about something way more material, in the sense that can be proven, checked. If the United States is feeling insecure about the information or think that TikTok is acting in bad faith, he could appoint people to check it, and have people checking the mainframes and all the machines that are used to make sure, but that's not what is being.
This isn't exact science. This isn't loosey goosey. They could actually verify, because it sounds to me what they're basically doing. I mean, are they challenging the authenticity of their representations about Project Texas?
I don't think so.
If they're not, then what is this data security? What's the national security issue? Other than the content one, which they're not allowed to, they're not allowed to censor the content. They're not doing anything about the algorithmic mind control on Facebook, or the algorithmic mind control on the other platforms. TikTok has been Ditto clarified for me on one of my other shows. He does consider TikTok to be algorithmic mind control, and I do too. What is it making you do? Well, we think it's making you go to the next video. We know that part. And what else is in there, kind of thing. But what else is in there? That's something that's in, with everything you see on TV or everything you see, whatever. And if that stuff is in there, you can usually find it somehow, and prove it. And so again, it's sort of like, and also if they have this board of directors with the cybersecurity experts on it from the United States, and they're doing their job, then there's penalties for that misrepresentation. That would be illegal if they're not doing what they say. So Congress just seems really confused to me about what they actually think. Did they pass this ban knowing it would never actually happen? Is that why they weren't worried about passing it? Did they, to keep it going long enough to be able to run their election, to use it for their election and all that kind of stuff? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that there is pressure from American companies that are worried about TikTok as a competitor. And there is this idea that there is a cost for every political action. So these congressmen, they're thinking, I have this package that was made to be passed, like with foreign aid, that is hard to be against. And you put TikTok ban inside it. So it's like, I can't be...
Right. No, I know that's how it passed. That's clearly how it passed. But I'm saying that one of the other reasons, because basically they didn't have to, it didn't have all the normal sort of debate and things like that. It was just sort of snuck in this thing that was already passing. And I'm not sure, again, my outlook is that, a lot of Congress doesn't really understand these kinds of issues anyway, but it was sort of like everybody else is doing it. What 75% or more of Congress is doing anything. Now you're the bad guy if you don't go. It's one of the other bad things that's kind of about the way that our Congress works, is it really becomes a popularity contest at a certain point when a bill is on the edge. And it could be good if you want it to pass. Like we were glad when it passed and, we get our health care. But a lot of times it's bad when it's a bad thing that nobody really knows. The DMCA itself was one of these things that was passed really out of, they had it in the drawer, as we like to say. They had it ready to go for when they thought they could get it through. And then when Sonny Bono died, and there was like sympathy for him dying, his wife, who had taken over his seat, floated it, said, Sonny always wanted copyright to be forever. And they took a vote and passed it that day. And this is what we are stuck with now forever. And there was very little debate or discussion, even, if any. I hate saying none, because somebody can say, somebody said one thing, or whatever. But it was basically passed without debate. And it's the problem with our system. It's also the problem with this two-party system that we have, where there's never London has its own, England has its own problems, but at least they have 5 parties that you can pit them against each other when somebody's out of control, right? The way our parties are, if it's not your guy, then you're just out of power for 4 years. So you want to back whoever it is if they're going to win, right? Well, that's just a system set up for getting some bad leaders. And I think history has sort of, set that up. So I'm really disheartened watching things go around and around and repeat themselves. Now that I've seen this enough times to see that happen. So I hope this just peters out. Nothing happens. ByteDance, the last 2 points, ByteDance has filed a lawsuit. And the other part of this legislation that I want to talk about real quick was just there's a process for determining if a social media app should be banned that is included in the legislation. So part of the legislation is setting up a process for how you might evaluate and ban other apps in the future. That in itself is not good, right? We don't want a process that makes it easy to do that. We want it to have to go through Congress every time, if that happens. So, they're making the slippery slope argument is really coming up a lot for this particular legislation. And again, not surprising because it wasn't really debated like it should have been and stuff. Let's just hope it peters out. Hopefully ByteDance's challenge will hold, hopefully different legal challenges. I could think of a number of them that could keep this in the courts for a while, even though they have everything. All the challenges have to be filed in this DC appeals court venue to keep it all in one place. And so as I think they're trying to help it not drag out by having it there, and having an appeals court making decision also makes it a more powerful decision, but that's included in the legislation. So it's really interesting to me how some parts of this legislation where people that have definite goals that they're trying to get through is in there. And then the part that's supposed to be protecting us, we got to ban it because of national security. That's not explained at all. And I don't think it's going to be, because national security. So that's our deal. I don't see any questions. Grant, do you have any questions you want to add, or anything you want to add? We got Grant Ellis here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Lisa. No, it's very interesting to me. I think, so I was listening to your argument very intently because I am one of the people who, in deference to national security, would normally say, no, I don't want anything associated with the Chinese Communist Party to have any relationship to anything that could impact our infrastructure or data security or anything. But as you explain it, there are ways.
I think everybody is in agreement on that. If it's an actual threat, sure.
Yes, but you explain it in a way that shows that you have to actually lay that out. It can't be fear-mongering. And also, there should be an opportunity to insulate this data, as you explained. And if it's in good faith, and if our national security apparatus can confirm it, that's fine. But as you've laid out, we don't see any of that on the record, at least that I'm aware of. And until I see it, I'm not going to be as comfortable with this law as I once was.
You were comfortable with this law? At any point?
Yes, because I believe we're moving towards a Cold War with the BRICS nations, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and therefore taking preemptive steps to isolate our domestic infrastructure would be in to the benefit of our domestic interest. But I don't think that should come at the expense of our access to information. This is a bad battlefield to fight that Cold War on, in my opinion.
Wow. Okay. So even if you have a little bit, even if you're buying into this sort of new Cold War, Grant's not the only one that I'm hearing this from. It's actually nice to have, that's good to have all the opinions on the show. And that is an actual real fear that people have. And I think that's what's been so hard over these last years, is that there is a real fear. But when things come out of the government about it, they don't make sense. Like the whole thing about the Russian elections, that Obama stuck out before the last election, the election that he did end up winning, but to say, oh, there's something going on with Russia and we're worried without any details just kind of freaks everybody out. Doesn't really have, and they weren't doing any of the things in that particular report, like the report, and there wasn't, and they weren't doing it because the report wasn't actually talking about anything real. It wasn't like the government said they were doing something and they weren't doing it. It was that there was no way to do what they were saying in the report because the report was just loosey-goosey bullshit, not really talking about anything concrete that anyone was doing because they can't tell us the details because national security. So there are certainly, you know, ways that we can, I hope to bring in, and again, with you, I'm glad that if you have this viewpoint that I was able to kind of help you understand a little bit about how as far as the U.S. user data seems to be protected unless they're lying, right? So is this law accusing them of lying? I mean, that's why I'm so confused about this law. So thank you so much, Grant, for adding that.
I'm surprised. I didn't expect you to think like I could be part of the enemy. Like
no,
well, he's talking about like your last president, right? That's what we're talking about. I mean, really, people should be more worried about us, especially if Trump gets elected. Then no one's safe, really. That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
And for what? But that's why, yeah, Brazil. To me, Brazil's a perfect example of you separate the government, you know, from the people. How's it going with your new president? Didn't you get a new president recently?
It's actually an old president.
Lula that came back?
Has been president for 8 years, and he's back now for another mandate.
Oh, okay.
Intercalated with other people before he came back, because we have this law that a president can only be reelected once for each time he is in office. So he can try again for re-election, so he can be for more 8 years instead of just 4. But he would have to get out of the office after that.
So it's 8 years at a time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Maximum. It's 4
So how's he
years
doing? What's it like having him back? That's what I was curious about. Is it better having him back?
It's better than Bolsonaro, because Bolsonaro was tragic, but it's actually a very weak government compared to his last one, because he's not as accepted or popular as before. And then he got elected with a very narrow margin and has not many deputies or senators in his side. So he's a little bit tied down and can't do the same things that he did before. But he's improving.
People aren't bolstering behind him because they're so happy to get rid of the other guy? You'd think
yes
you would want to...
No. Yes, because they're happy that the other one is gone. But many of the things that he did are getting to be felt now. So like prices of foodstuffs, they're still trying to be stabilized. We had a little bit of inflation like you're having, and it's finally going down now. So we had other problems about infrastructure. If you look at the news now, you're going to see that the south of the country is having lots of rainfall and flooding. So it's almost all of the state of Rio Grande do Sul, it's underwater. So millions of refugees. It's like Katrina, but here in Brazil, no? Very bad.
Oh, wow. Oh, God, the poor guy. So it's like, what's the name of this? I keep calling him the guy. What's the name of the new leader?
Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. It's more often called Lula. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Lula is like a nickname that he adopted.
Okay. So he just had some bad luck as far as things going wrong at the beginning of his administration, huh? Like to have a disaster and to have this is just like what happened when you got the last guy that screwed things up. You come in and they're still hurt from the stuff from the last guy, but it looks like you did it or that you have something to do with it and you're supposed to fix it right away. And it's not always that easy.
Yeah. And the right-wing ascension, the Bolsonaro government, came with a lot of deputies and senators being elected. So we have many congressmen that are far right. So they make the government harder to. So there's many factors that result in a not so good government now. We have like a very big interest rate that was being elevated by the last government. And we have a law that our banking system is separated from the presidency. So the central banking, they have a team of advisors, and most of them are still from the last government. Just in December this year, that will be the opposite, that the current government will have the majority of the banking system. So we can't control like interest rates, we can't control many things yet, in the sense the new government is actually facing many barriers.
Because they've got people in power, in place, and the positions actually working against him.
Yeah.
As he's trying to do new things.
He actually went to the news to complain about that many times, and people were like, "Oh, you're president, you can't do that." And he was like, "What can I do then? They have to pay this exorbitant amount of interest, and I need the money to invest in other things." It was very big pressure to approve laws, to have some room in the budgets to do things, because it was a lot of damage done by the last government.
All right. All right. Well, thank you for that update. That's very interesting. All right, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And thanks so much, everyone, for watching. And we will see you again. I am figuring out exactly when. It looks like it will be June 22nd. So we'll see everybody on June 22nd.